Nestled in the heart of Texas, the quaint community of Maplewood Springs is the epitome of suburban bliss. With its neat rows of houses, each seemingly designed to resemble the last, and well-manicured lawns that burst with seasonal flowers, it's a picturesque neighborhood that draws families and retirees alike. The warm climate allows for year-round outdoor activities, from block parties during summer barbecues to winter gatherings around fire pits. However, beneath this idyllic surface lies a complex layer governed by a Homeowners Association, HOA, that dictates much of the residents' lives. The HOA plays a crucial role in maintaining the aesthetics and property values of Maplewood Springs. This organization sets forth a detailed set of rules and guidelines that every homeowner must adhere to, ensuring uniformity in design and landscaping choices. While many appreciate the efforts to uphold neighborhood standards, others find these regulations stifling, viewing them as an infringement on personal freedom. One specific rule that has become a point of contention relates to property alterations, particularly when it comes to fences. In Maplewood Springs, fences are more than just barriers, they are symbols of privacy and security. Yet, the HOA's stringent guidelines restrict homeowners from erecting fences without prior approval. This often leads to heated debates at regular HOA meetings where decisions are made by a select few residents, the HOA board members. Among them is Karen, a self-appointed enforcer of rules who takes great pride in upholding the community's standards. To her, every violation is a personal affront and an opportunity to flex her authority. For many residents like our protagonist, this means navigating an intricate web of bureaucracy whenever they wish to make changes to their homes. The process requires submitting requests that are often met with skepticism or outright denial from the board. The rationale usually revolves around maintaining a specific aesthetic and aim that occasionally overlooks individual needs for safety or privacy. As tensions simmer regarding these regulations, new residents join the community with fresh ideas about homeownership and personal expression. They come armed with their dreams of creating sanctuaries within their yards, dreams that can be dashed by Karen's unwavering vigilance. Yet despite these challenges, many still love living in Maplewood Springs for its charm and strong sense of community. In this environment where rules reign supreme and community dynamics can shift on a whim, one question looms large: how far will someone go to defend their right to create a space that feels safe and welcoming? And what happens when those very rules come crashing down in unexpected ways? As we delve deeper into this tale of community conflict over personal property rights, we'll soon discover how the delicate balance between order and chaos will be tested when an unforeseen incident disrupts the usual calm of Maplewood Springs. As the sun set over Maplewood Springs, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange, the protagonist, Sarah, stood in her backyard contemplating a change that could transform her home. The absence of a fence left her feeling exposed, her children played outside without the safety barrier she craved, and the constant worries about wandering pets or prying eyes added to her unease. After much reflection, she decided that erecting a fence would not just offer privacy but also create a defined space for her family to enjoy. With plans in hand, Sarah envisioned a sturdy wooden fence that would complement the aesthetics of her home and enhance the community's appeal. It wasn't just about enclosing her yard, it was about providing peace of mind, a sanctuary for her children where they could play freely without fear of unwanted intrusions or accidents involving loose animals. However, this dream met an immediate roadblock: the HOA's stringent regulations regarding property modifications. Armed with guidelines etched in stone, the HOA had established rules that required homeowners to seek prior approval before making any alterations to their properties. Sarah knew this but felt confident that her plan was within bounds. After all, she had observed numerous fences lining many backyards throughout the neighborhood. Yet none belonged to houses directly overseen by Karen, who had made it known in previous meetings that she was particularly zealous in enforcing regulations. Determined to move forward, Sarah submitted her request to the HOA board, detailing her proposed design and rationale. To her dismay, however, Karen's influence loomed large over their response. Within days, an official letter arrived stating that Sarah's request had been denied due to community aesthetic violations, a vague term often employed by Karen to maintain control over neighborhood appearances. Feeling deflated yet undeterred, Sarah reached out to neighbors who echoed similar frustrations regarding Karen's tight grip on community affairs. She learned of residents who shared their painful experiences navigating the approvals process and ultimately surrendered their own fencing dreams out of sheer exasperation. The prevailing sentiment among them was one of helplessness, they were caught in a web woven from rules created to enhance their lives but instead trapped them within boundaries they never signed up for. Over dinner with her family that evening, Sarah expressed her discontent. "It's as if we're living in a museum rather than a community," she lamented. "No one should have to beg for basic security and comfort at home." Yet even amid these frustrations, there was hope that perhaps change could be attained if enough residents rallied together. Inspired by this thought, Sarah felt invigorated. She resolved not only to fight for her fence but also for every homeowner seeking similar freedoms in Maplewood Springs. Little did she know how soon this resolve would be put to the test when unforeseen events began challenging both the HOA's authority and the fabric of their community. In the heart of Maplewood Springs, Karen was a name both feared and respected. As a longtime resident and a prominent member of the Homeowners Association, she had made it her mission to maintain the neighborhood's pristine image. To her, rules were not merely guidelines, they were covenants that defined the very fabric of their community. With her sharp tongue and unwavering conviction, Karen had become the unofficial enforcer of HOA policies, relishing her role as the guardian of property values and neighborhood aesthetics. Dressed in tailored blouses, pressed slacks, and with her hair always impeccably styled, Karen embodied the ideal of suburban propriety. She could often be seen patrolling the streets with an air of authority, clipboard in hand as she recorded any perceived violations, whether it was an untrimmed lawn or an improperly parked car. While some residents appreciated her commitment to order, others grew weary of her relentless vigilance. What began as a desire to enhance community standards morphed into a reputation for nitpicking every detail. Karen's disdain for non-compliance was evident during HOA meetings where she would address homeowners with thinly veiled condescension. Armed with a wealth of knowledge about every rule and regulation, she often dismissed appeals without hesitation, citing precedents that supported her decisions. Her presence could cast a pall over discussions. Any mention of changes, like Sarah's proposed fence, invoked an almost primal reaction from her. The mere thought that someone might encroach on what she deemed acceptable set her on high alert. Though Karen maintained that her intentions were rooted in care for their community's image, whispers floated among neighbors about her intolerance for creative expression. Newcomers like Sarah viewed her as obstructive rather than protective. Despite their frustrations, many felt powerless against Karen's influence within the HOA, a realization that left them feeling trapped within an invisible cage built from rigid guidelines. Yet beneath this stern exterior lay complexities few understood. Karen had lived through various trials that shaped her beliefs. Perhaps it was part of why she clung so fiercely to rules, her way of creating order in what felt like an increasingly chaotic world. Within the confines of the well-manicured neighborhood lay stories untold of past conflicts and personal losses, and perhaps even fears of losing control over something she cherished deeply. As tensions mounted in Maplewood Springs surrounding Sarah's fence and other issues raised by residents fed up with Karen's control, it became increasingly clear that this clash was more than just about rules. It was about personal freedoms and communal harmony being tested in ways no one could have predicted. Soon, as Sarah began rallying support from other homeowners disillusioned by their situation, it became evident that change might be on the horizon for Maplewood Springs, and how this played out would directly involve Karen herself in ways she'd never anticipated. Determined to reclaim her right to privacy and safety, Sarah prepared to appeal the HOA's decision regarding her fence. The process, however, proved to be anything but straightforward. With the rules laid out in black and white, she knew that convincing the HOA, or more specifically, Karen, would be an uphill battle. Nonetheless, she gathered her notes and outlined her arguments for the upcoming HOA meeting, where homeowners could voice their concerns and propose changes. On the night of the meeting, Sarah arrived at the community center, a building exuding both warmth and tension. Residents filled the room, each representing their own interests amid a tight-knit community fraught with unspoken grievances. Karen presided over the meeting with a sense of ownership, her presence immediately commanding respect and caution from those in attendance. As discussions flowed about mundane topics, landscaping guidelines and seasonal events, Sarah waited for her opportunity to speak. Finally, as the agenda item regarding landscaping was concluded, Sarah seized the moment. Rising from her seat, she took a deep breath and introduced herself. "I'd like to address my recent fence proposal," she began, projecting confidence despite her pounding heart. She calmly recounted her reasons for wanting to build the fence: safety for her children and peace of mind. However, her words were met with skepticism from certain board members who echoed Karen's previous sentiments about maintaining visual harmony in their neighborhood. "That sounds lovely in theory," Karen interjected smoothly but firmly, "but we must consider how it coincides with our community standards. After all, we have rules for a reason." Her voice dripped with condescension that heightened the room's tension as murmurs rippled through the audience. Sarah fought back frustration as she navigated Karen's opposition during further discussions. Each point she made seemed countered by fresh objections from Karen framed around aesthetics rather than practicality. It was clear that winning this battle would require more than just good intentions. It demanded strategic maneuvering and support from fellow residents. After several back-and-forth exchanges that escalated tensions between them, Sarah's impassioned pleas meeting Karen's unyielding rhetoric, the meeting concluded without resolution on her appeal. Feeling disheartened yet motivated by newly ignited determination, Sarah sought out others after adjournment to gauge support. Some neighbors approached to express sympathy. They too had faced similar battles against Karen's enforcement tactics. They offered words of encouragement and shared their experiences navigating the rigid HOA policies, many of which had left them feeling stifled in their own homes. Sarah realized that this moment was more significant than just attempting to build a fence. It represented a larger struggle for autonomy within Maplewood Springs itself. Fueled by solidarity with kindred spirits and frustration, Sarah resolved not only to fight for herself but also to advocate for those silenced by fear of confrontation or dismissal, a movement slowly forming among disaffected homeowners yearning for agency over their properties before tensions reached a tipping point. As Sarah left that night under a canopy of stars illuminated softly by streetlights lining Maplewood Springs streets, she felt emboldened, and unforeseen alliances had been forged among neighbors now willing to stand together against an ever-watchful eye intent on preserving its dominion over their lives, and soon enough, this push for change would challenge everything Karen believed about community governance itself. As time passed without a fence, Sarah's concerns about safety grew more pressing. Her children loved to play in the backyard, but without the barrier of a fence, she felt increasingly anxious about their freedom. The absence of protection left them vulnerable not only to curious neighbors but also to wandering animals in the area. It was a worry she couldn't shake, as every playful laughter echoed with the risk of an unfortunate encounter. One afternoon, while her children were riding their bikes in what should have been the sanctuary of their own yard, a large dog appeared from nowhere, its owner absent and blissfully unaware. The animal bounded into their space, barking excitedly at the children who screeched in surprise and fear. The dog's sudden invasion sent Sarah into a panic. She rushed outside to shoo it away, her heart racing as she imagined the worst. "Get back," she called out, hoping to contain the situation before it escalated. The children quickly scattered towards the house, leaving Sarah to confront the large dog alone. Thankfully, it merely wanted to play, but the incident left her shaken. She realized that without a fence, her backyard was no longer a safe haven but an open invitation. This event played on replay in her mind long after it was over, highlighting how unprotected their home felt without any physical barriers. Each day brought new anxieties. Would another loose animal wander into their yard? Would her kids be safe playing outside? The peace of mind she had once taken for granted had been stripped away by Karen's adherence to HOA regulations and her own struggle for autonomy. Moreover, conversations with neighbors echoed similar fears. A few shared anecdotes about loose dogs invading their spaces or cats climbing into gardens uninvited. They had also felt a sense of vulnerability with no enclosures between their homes and the outside world. It became clear that Sarah's plight resonated deeply with many residents. Everyone yearned for safety and privacy but felt chained by regulations that didn't consider real-life consequences. As Sarah navigated these mounting fears, she began considering ways to channel this anxiety into action. She thought about organizing a community meeting focused not just on her fence proposal but on broader safety concerns regarding loose animals in Maplewood Springs. Perhaps this platform could serve to voice collective worries and push for more robust measures within the community, including stricter leash laws or even pet registration requirements. The challenge of dealing with loose animals wasn't simply an inconvenience, it represented an ongoing threat against the shared values of security and comfort that each homeowner desired to uphold. Armed with newfound determination and solidarity from fellow residents facing similar issues, Sarah realized that pushing for her fence could evolve into advocating for community-wide changes that ensured everyone's well-being. With renewed purpose leading her forward, Sarah remained resolute, no longer just fighting for her family's sanctuary but for a collective future where every resident felt empowered to protect their home and family amidst Maplewood Springs' ongoing struggles with authority and safety alike. One sunny afternoon, the tranquility of Maplewood Springs was abruptly disrupted by a commotion that caught the attention of several residents. Karen, perched comfortably in her backyard, had just finished pruning her prized rose bushes when she heard a ruckus originating from her neighbor's yard, an unexpected sound that sent a momentary chill down her spine. Moments later, the cause of the noise burst onto the scene. A large golden retriever, leash trailing behind it and tongue lolling happily, zoomed into Karen's well-manicured garden. The innocent creature had escaped from a nearby home, chasing after an errant squirrel that unwittingly led it into new territory. To the dog, Karen's pristine flower beds looked like an invitation for playful exploration. Karen froze, her authoritative demeanor fading as she watched the dog romp through her tulips. This sight rattled her. She'd spent countless hours tending to her garden, ensuring that every petal was perfectly placed according to the community's aesthetic standards. As if in a nightmare, she witnessed the golden fur ball digging joyfully at the base of her favorite flowers. Panic gripped her heart. "Hey! Get back here," she shouted, trying to maintain an air of control, but her voice faltered under the weight of disbelief and irritation. The dog's owner emerged from their house moments later, apologetic yet clearly amused by the chaotic scene unfolding before them. As Karen approached the dog to shoo it away, she felt a wave of vulnerability wash over her. In one swift moment, she was stripped of her rigid persona as HOA enforcer. There stood Karen, the diligent gardener, face to face with a rambunctious but harmless creature whose only intent was to revel in newfound freedom. The laughter of onlookers filtered around her while she fumbled awkwardly with the situation. Despite her best efforts to assert authority over this unexpected intruder, Karen's futile attempts only exacerbated her embarrassment. The dog sniffed around playfully and seemed oblivious to her commands. With each passing second, she realized that trying to maintain strict control over everything, even a simple dog, was an exercise in frustration that proved counterproductive. The gathering crowd began to chuckle softly, some shaking their heads knowingly at what they saw as cosmic irony, a strict enforcer facing off against a joyful dog while her own carefully crafted image crumbled just a bit under the pressure. In that moment, Karen felt exposed and vulnerable. Perhaps there was more to life than enforcing rules and living by rigid standards. Finally, after several attempts to redirect the playful dog back toward its owner, Karen managed to usher it towards safety. Breathing heavily, she turned away from the spectacle but could still hear whispers from her neighbors about how ironic it was for someone who scolded others for minor infractions to be brought low by a loose dog. As she sat down later that evening in quiet reflection amidst rapidly fading sunlight, Karen couldn't help but question whether clinging so tightly to those community regulations truly served anyone's best interests, including her own. This incident revealed that even she was not immune to life's unpredictability and highlighted how important connection was in a community built on shared lives and experiences rather than on rigid enforcement alone. Little did she know how this encounter would ripple through Maplewood Springs, as Sarah continued organizing discussions about safety and community spirit. Nursing this small incident into something larger would lead everyone, including Karen, to rethink what it meant to truly protect their neighborhood. In the aftermath of the chaotic encounter with the loose golden retriever, Karen found herself grappling with an unexpected wave of emotions. The laughter and snickering from her neighbors lingered in her ears as she returned to the sanctuary of her home, her carefully curated image now marred by a moment of vulnerability. Dawn was the self-assured enforcer of HOA regulations. Instead, she felt like just another resident caught off guard by the unpredictability of life. As she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the remnants of her once pristine garden, panic began to seep in. What if that dog had been aggressive? What if it had harmed her flowers or, worse yet, frightened her grandchildren who often visited? In that instant, Karen realized that her rigid enforcement of property rules had not prepared her for genuine threats that existed beyond aesthetics. The irony was not lost on her. Here she was, a woman who prided herself on maintaining order and decorum in Maplewood Springs, reduced to a state of anxiety over a playful dog. It was a stark contrast to how she had treated others who sought leniency or had attempted to express themselves through home modifications. Her heart raced as she recalled moments when she had dismissed residents' concerns with an authoritative wave or a sharp comment about community standards. Karen's mind spiraled into what-ifs, each scenario more alarming than the last. She envisioned children tripping over flower beds while playing in the street and being chased by loose dogs, all while being powerless to protect them because of her unwavering commitment to guidelines that seem so trivial now. What good were rules if they did not account for real-life incidents that could impact their safety? With every passing minute alone in her kitchen, Karen felt the weight of isolation creeping in. The very residents she sought to control were now witnesses to her struggle. They had seen this moment of weakness unravel before their eyes. She began to question whether her strict adherence to regulations truly served their collective interests or merely fed her own need for control. Later that evening, as she reflected on the day's events under dim lighting, thoughts turned toward Sarah and the growing movement among residents advocating for change. She thought about how they wanted more than just physical barriers like fences. They wanted assurance and safety in their community without feeling stifled by rules designed for uniformity. Could there be room for compromise? Could their HOA embrace a more flexible approach that balanced aesthetics with practical concerns? For the first time, Karen considered reaching out, not just as an enforcer but as someone willing to engage in dialogue about shared values and experiences within their neighborhood. This shift in perspective marked a pivotal moment for Karen, a realization that perhaps it wasn't only about enforcing rules but fostering connections that made Maplewood Springs truly feel like home. Little did she know how this newfound openness would reverberate through community discussions initiated by Sarah, transforming not only Karen's relationship with her neighbors but also reshaping how they all viewed safety and cooperation in their beloved neighborhood. In the wake of the recent events, conversations bubbled throughout Maplewood Springs, revealing a community divided over both Karen's drastic enforcement of HOA rules and Sarah's quest for a fence. As stories circulated among neighbors in their yards and at local gatherings, opinions varied widely, creating an atmosphere charged with conflicting emotions. Some residents rallied around Karen, appreciating her diligence in maintaining the neighborhood's aesthetic and property values. They argued that her strict adherence to rules was necessary for preserving the charm of Maplewood Springs. Without people like Karen keeping watch, we'd see a decline in standards, one neighbor remarked as they tended to their landscaping. This group viewed her behavior as strong leadership. They believed it safeguarded the community from potential chaos that could arise if everyone operated without boundaries. Conversely, a growing number of residents resonated with Sarah's plight. They felt that Karen's rigidity stifled their ability to personalize their homes and fostered an environment of fear rather than collaboration. "It feels like walking on eggshells," one mother confessed at a playdate, echoing sentiments shared by many newcomers who found themselves frustrated by the barrier between rule enforcement and personal expression. To them, Sarah seemed like a beacon of hope, a woman willing to stand against the tide of conformity enforced by Karen and call out the need for safety and individual freedoms. As discussions continued, some neighbors began to hold informal gatherings where they shared experiences of feeling oppressed by HOA regulations. These meetings often ended with spirited debates about what it meant to live in a community built on cooperation versus control, a tension that had become increasingly palpable in everyday interactions. Further complicating matters was the loose dog incident, which had etched itself into public memory. For some, this event reinforced their belief that the rigidity of HOA rules failed to account for real-life dangers residing in their lax leash policies. "If we are so concerned about aesthetics, why didn't we account for safety left unchecked?" one resident pondered aloud during casual weekend BBQs. The collective frustration surrounding both Karen's authority and the threat posed by loose dogs brought neighbors together in unexpected ways, making even some longtime supporters of Karen question her unyielding approach. "I think she may be realizing there's more to being part of this community than just enforcing rules," one older resident noted to another as they watched children play under a slightly more relaxed eye. That shift seemed possible. Not only could Sarah be the catalyst for change, but perhaps Karen herself could become more open-minded about engaging with her neighbors' concerns moving forward. Would there finally be room for compromise? The atmosphere buzzed with curiosity about how everything might unfold as Sarah continued organizing meetings aimed at unifying the residents around shared values that emphasized safety while respecting individual expression. Such discussions promised to reshape not just perceptions toward Karen but how every member engaged with the principles that brought them together as a unique suburban haven. As tensions reached a new crescendo, Maplewood Springs stood on the precipice of transformative change, one sparked by personal passion clashing against community expectations, and whether they could embrace both seemed uncertain yet hopeful in equal measure. As the dust settled in Maplewood Springs following the dramatic events surrounding the loose dog incident, it became clear that a shift was taking place within the community, one that promised to reshape the dynamics of the Homeowners Association for years to come. After a series of informal gatherings where residents voiced their concerns and dreams for a more connected neighborhood, an official HOA meeting was called to address these evolving sentiments. During this pivotal meeting, Sarah took center stage, supported by her fellow homeowners who had grown increasingly vocal in their desire for change. Armed with anecdotes about the loose dog incident and stories of feeling stifled under strict regulations, she aptly articulated the collective longing for a neighborhood where personal expression could coexist with community standards. Her confidence resonated throughout the room, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Karen sat at the front, her usual staunchness softening as she listened. The very woman who had previously dismissed Sarah's plea for offense now found herself grappling with the weight of her neighbors' dissatisfaction. The night unfolded as a clash between long-standing rules and the need for flexibility, a conversation that had been avoided for too long. As Sarah presented her case, Karen felt a growing sense of conflicted loyalty to both her position and her community. There was no denying how valuable Sarah's perspectives were and how deeply they resonated with many residents. Perhaps it was time to reconsider how rules were established in Maplewood Springs. Maybe we need to look at our guidelines, Karen finally interjected hesitantly, her voice measured yet undeniably sincere. We've focused so much on aesthetics that we may have lost sight of what makes our community truly strong: connection and safety. A wave of surprise rippled through those present. It was a rare moment that hinted at willingness for change from someone so grounded in traditions. Residents began to share ideas about establishing a committee that would allow them to frequently reassess rules, engaging more directly with their neighbors to hear their needs and concerns before drawing up rigid ordinances. One proposal suggested creating flexibility around property modifications that offered safety without compromising neighborhood charm, an idea that would allow Sarah's dream of a fence to materialize while ensuring it fit harmoniously within the community aesthetic. As discussions flowed, the tension gave way to collaboration. There was an infectious enthusiasm in reimagining what participation in their HOA could look like. This was more than just a compromise, it was about fostering an inclusive atmosphere where all voices were acknowledged. Karen realized then that she could meld her vision for order with this new eagerness among residents for a more open dialogue, a realization that transformed her stance from enforcer to facilitator. Little by little, ideas crystallized into actionable guidelines that balanced individual freedom with community integrity, ultimately resulting in practical adjustments for future residents navigating similar challenges. The conversation sparked by Sarah's predicament had grown into a broader movement aimed at inclusivity and adaptability, all born from reflecting on past encounters in pursuit of better living standards in homes they cherished. Maplewood Springs stood poised on the brink of reinvention, embracing a future where everyone played a role in creating a harmonious shared space, marking a new chapter for generations to come. As Maplewood Springs moves forward from the recent upheaval, a renewed sense of community emerges, highlighting the delicate balance between regulations and individual needs within a homeowner association setting. The events that transpired, spurred by Sarah's advocacy for her fence and Karen's unexpected moment of vulnerability, have catalyzed a re-evaluation of what it means to live harmoniously in a shared space. Residents are beginning to understand that community dynamics extend far beyond aesthetic standards and enforcement of rules. They recognize that their identities as individuals are deeply intertwined with their identities as neighbors. In this interconnected web, personal responsibility becomes paramount. Each member must acknowledge how their actions and the regulations they uphold impact others' experiences in their community. The discussions initiated by Sarah have paved the way for a platform where all voices can be heard, fostering an environment that values both expression and conformity. The collective sentiment has shifted towards welcoming new ideas rather than simply adhering to long-standing traditions, which could alienate those who yearn for safety without compromising their individuality. For the first time, residents feel empowered to address their collective concerns and desires openly, reinforcing the notion that community should reflect its members' diverse aspirations. Meanwhile, Karen's evolving perspective on her role highlights a critical aspect of effective leadership: flexibility. By opening herself to dialogue rather than clinging rigidly to enforcement, she sets a precedent for future HOA interactions. Encouraging compromise while maintaining structure is no small feat, yet it proves essential for cultivating an inclusive atmosphere where residents feel valued. It's about crafting guidelines that uphold the neighborhood's integrity while adapting to the evolving needs of its inhabitants. This transformation signifies more than just amendments to policies, it represents the potential for Maplewood Springs to become a model for other communities facing similar challenges. The idea of shared governance is taking root. Neighbors are recognizing that they can co-create their living environment through mutual respect and cooperation. By working together, they establish a stronger foundation built on understanding and support rather than fear or suspicion. Looking ahead, the implications for future residents are profound. They will inherit not just house designs or landscaping styles but also a culture of collaboration that encourages participation and engagement. Newcomers will find themselves welcomed into a community willing to listen and adapt rather than impose stifling constraints. As Sarah, Karen, and their fellow homeowners navigate this new chapter together, they witness firsthand the power of reflection and dialogue in shaping their environment. They learn that regulations serve best when they prioritize safety and community spirit over mere aesthetics. In this light, Maplewood Springs stands poised not only to thrive but also to exemplify how even the most entrenched divisions can transform into opportunities for connection and growth. With each step taken towards inclusivity and adaptability, they embrace the notion that they are not just residents of a neighborhood but active participants in the ever-evolving story of their shared home.